Tonight, Omaha City Councilman Vinny Palermo is no longer vice president of the council, a position that put him second in line of succession to lead the city.
This is a temporary move by the city council. 6 News' Bella Caracta is following developments from downtown and joins us now live to explain what comes next. Bella?
Jacqueline, all but one city council member voted to temporarily remove Councilmember Vinny Palermo as vice president. Councilwoman Juanita Johnson decided to abstain from voting, stressing that Palermo is innocent until proven guilty. Notably, she was the only city council member who attended that initial appearance in Lincoln yesterday. As for what's next, they scheduled a hearing for a week from today at the next city council meeting to allow for Palermo to come visit and testify on his own behalf. The decision next week would either permanently remove Palermo or not as vice president. We don't know if it will be possible for him to testify on his own behalf next week at City Council, since he's currently detained on federal charges that include various fraud allegations in his role as a councilman. As we mentioned earlier today, a hearing on whether he will stay in custody will be determined tomorrow morning. As we've mentioned, the city charter prohibits City Council from removing Palermo from the City Council, but they do have the power of taking away his leadership position as well as his committees, which City Council President Pete Festerman already did in removing him from his committees.
But the pattern of his past activities and the new allegations of criminal conspiracy, public corruption, and fraud is, to say at the least, very concerning. Mr. Palermo should not be making decisions on city contracts. He should not be making decisions on public safety. He should not be making decisions on expenditures of taxpayers' dollars.
Now, how can Palermo lose his spot on City Council? Well, that automatically happens if he is convicted of any of the felony charges or if he has 3 months of unexcused absences from City Council, which very well could happen if in the hearing tomorrow a judge determines that he will remain locked up. Reporting live downtown, Bella Caracta, 6 News.
With today's vote, Amy Melton becomes the acting mayor if Mayor Gene Stothert and City Council President Pete Festerson are out of town. If Palermo's spot becomes permanently vacant, the City Council does have the power to fill it.